All right, so we went over how to make adjustments on the fly to the saddle. Now we're going to talk about headsets. There are two types of headsets, and adjusting them is a little bit different depending on which one you're looking at. We're going to start with a threaded style headset. So that basically there are threaded and there are unthreaded headsets. So we're starting with a threaded. I'll show you how these work, why they're called threaded headsets, and most importantly, how to adjust them. A threaded headset is going to have a 6mm Allen bolt holding it on tight from the top. And what I'm gonna do is loosen this and go ahead and pull it all the way out. So you can see there's a little bit of gunk on there. But the reason that they call these threaded is that bolt actually threads right into the bottom here. And as I tighten that bolt, this wedge is gonna work its way up, and it effectively increases the width of the setup so that it pinches itself inside of the frame of the bike. For our purposes, we don't have to take these all the way out, but I like to pull it out just so that you see how they work. And also, more importantly, you can check out if I wipe off some of this grease, there's always a safety mark. That is something that you don't want to be visible. That mark shows you that that's the minimum insert amount. So I would, at a minimum, insert it that far into the frame. And I can go ahead and grab my bolt at the top and tighten this back down. So I can make minor adjustments up and down using this top bolt, and that will apply to all threaded headsets. This one in particular is an adjustable threaded headset. This extra bolt that's on the side here, let's say I had a customer that wanted the handlebars up higher or lower. I'm gonna go ahead, looks like it's a 6mm. And they'll play this trick on you constantly. Some of them are gonna be 6, some of them are gonna be 5, some of them are gonna be 4, some of them are gonna be a combination. So often you need kind of a hodgepodge of hex keys in your pocket when you're working on these. But you'll see I've loosened this up, and now I'm gonna be able to adjust my entire headset controls here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna bring it up, and you'll notice that as I do that, I'm actually changing the angle of the handlebars. I've brought the hand position up higher, but I've sort of messed with the angle of the bars. So now I'm gonna make a final adjustment up here at the top clamp to rotate these bars back forward so that the angle has not been messed with too much. It's gonna be a 4mm. So I'll go ahead and loosen these up. You don't have to take this face plate all the way off, just get it loose. And now I've got maneuverability this way. Go ahead and scoot this forward. Most people are surprised to discover just how adjustable modern bikes are. As you've probably realized by now, between this pivot point and this being able to rotate, I have a nearly infinite number of possibilities of where I could put this bar. So we'll often end up doing this type of stuff for fittings with the customer sitting on the bike because we can kind of maneuver it exactly where they're going to be comfortable. One thing I will say about headsets, and we will practice these quite a bit before getting you doing them on the floor, it is really important that all these bolts are torqued down nice and tight. Obviously, it's a huge safety concern if you're riding the bike and you have an issue with your headset where something goes loose. So if there's anything that we always double, triple, and quadruple check, it's gonna be the tightness of the bolts. So as a sanity check, whenever I finish doing an adjustment like this, I will start from the top and I'll go in and I'll say, let's make sure that all of my bolts are nice and tight. That one feels snug, that one too. And then finally my 4mm, just as a sanity check, because again, it's a safety concern if somebody's rolling down the street and all of a sudden their headset's loose on them. But that's how the threaded headsets work. Next, we're gonna get into unthreaded headsets. All right, so the other style of headset, the more modern type that we typically see on newer bikes, is gonna be the unthreaded. That's not a hard and fast rule. You can see some new bikes that are coming out that still have threaded headsets, but usually the threaded headsets are characteristic of some of the older bicycles. Almost everything from the 90s and the early 2000s, especially hybrids and mountain bikes, had threaded headsets. However, we're now gonna look at the more modern style unthreaded headsets. If you're ever confused as to being able to visually determine which one is which, just remember that old one I was able to pull out and it had the big thread on the bottom. This one does not have that capability. So this one, the stem is actually gonna be separate from the steer tube. And I'll show you how that works. When we're making adjustments, we won't have to take this all the way apart, but I do think that it's helpful to show people exactly how these look. So there's a top bolt that holds my cap And then there's these two side bolts that actually snugs the stem. So you'll see my stem is able to move freely back and forth now. And what I'll do is I'll pull this off. So you'll see that top bolt was just a cap that was tying this down into the steer tube. And now this is completely separated. You can see how this is different from the threaded headset. Again, the stem is a separate unit from what's gonna actually go down into the frame. We don't need to take this entire thing off when making adjustments. All we need to do is first loosen this top stem, this top cap here, just a little bit loose so that we'll have the maneuverability. And then as soon as I freed these, you saw that I'm good to go. With making adjustments with this, typically it's more so as a spot check for quality control instead of making an adjustment for the customer. These tend to be a lot less adjustable than the threaded headsets. So we'll often get questions of like, hey, can I move the handlebars up on this? Technically, the answer to that question is yes, but what we might need to do is actually swap out the stem itself for something that might have a little bit more rise, a little bit more length, or maybe even swapping a handlebar for something that's got a little bit more rise. So making adjustments with these more modern setups is a little bit more involved. You'll do a little bit less on the fly adjustments, but if you, for example, had a customer that said, hey, I think my alignment's a little bit off. You can see how this is turning a little bit that way compared to the wheel. Now you know, loosen these bolts, get yourself lined up here. First thing I'll do, I'll snug down my top bolt. You don't need to super over tighten this, because if, for example, I torch this down really tight, I'm gonna feel it in turning the actual wheel. This is really tight. You want it snug, but not over tightened. It's just enough to compress the bearings in that front end of the tube there. So you'll see I still can move this. It's not overly loose. There's no play in there. I've snugged the top cap down. Now I'll go ahead and get this in line with my front wheel, and I'll snug down my side bolts, which is actually going to be what holds the entire thing straight. So you'll see now it actually will turn the wheel.